The sound of the slap was not theatrical. It wasn't a resonating crack that echoed off marble walls. It was a wet, sharp, humiliating thwack that sliced through the soft jazz and murmured negotiations of Aurelius. Every champagne flute paused mid-toast. $100,000 worth of silk and cashmere went rigid. The red mark spreading across the waitress's pale cheek looked like fire against snow. But she didn't gasp. She didn't apologize again. She just slowly, impossibly slowly, turned her head back to center, her dark eyes finally lifting to meet those of Evelyn Harrington, the perfectly composed fiancée of billionaire Lucas Whitmore. And what happened in the next 60 seconds didn't just shock the table. It made Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop restaurant stop breathing. This isn't a story about a rude customer in a fancy restaurant. It's about what happens when the wrong person gets humiliated in public, and the carefully constructed lie holding a $9 billion empire together finally shatters. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. Aurelius wasn't just a restaurant, it was a blood test. Perched 60 floors above the grinding machinery of Manhattan, it existed in that rarefied altitude where oxygen felt thinner and consequences felt optional. The reservation list read like a Forbes directory. The waiting time was measured in political favors and board memberships. You didn't walk into Aurelius. You were vetted, approved, and escorted like a dignitary entering sovereign territory. Tonight, the dining room glowed with the particular warmth of old money and new power making quiet deals over wine that cost more than most people's cars. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across white tablecloths. Floor to ceiling, windows framed the city below like a conquest already won. Conversations never rose above a cultured murmur. Volume was for people who needed to be heard. At table 7, positioned with geometric precision near the eastern windows, sat Lucas Whitmore. $9.4 billion, according to the latest Forbes estimate, though anyone who'd actually read Whitmore Capital's SEC filings knew that number was conservative. Early 40s, with the kind of effortless posture that came from never having doubted his place in a room. His navy suit was bespoke, his watch was vintage Patek Philippe, and his attention was currently absorbed by his phone, where Asian markets were opening and opportunities were bleeding into his inbox. Beside him, Evelyn Harrington sat with the architectural precision of a woman raised by etiquette tutors and expectations. Connecticut old money, the kind that didn't need to prove anything because it had already proven everything 3 generations ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a flawless chignon. Her burgundy dress probably cost more than the average monthly rent in the city sprawling beneath them. And on her left hand, catching the light like a calculated weapon, sat a diamond engagement ring the size of a grape. They made a perfect pair, everyone said so. Across the dining room, moving between tables with the practiced invisibility of service staff, was Naomi. Black apron tied precisely at her waist, hair pulled back into a functional ponytail, no jewelry, no makeup beyond what was required to look presentable. She carried a tray of wine glasses with the careful economy of someone who understood that dropping things had consequences. Her eyes stayed low, trained on the task. Her movements were fluid but restrained, like she was trying very hard to take up as little space as possible. To the senators and hedge fund managers and tech CEOs filling Aurelius tonight, she was wallpaper, necessary, replaceable, invisible. But if you looked closely, and nobody was looking closely, you might notice something didn't quite fit. The way her fingers rested on the wine bottle showed more precision than nervousness. The way her eyes flicked across the room captured information the way a tactical analyst might, not the way a server checking tables would. There was a stillness to her that felt rehearsed, controlled. Like she was waiting for something. The wine being poured was a 1996 Chateau Margaux, $11,000 a bottle. Evelyn had ordered it with the casual authority of someone who'd never looked at the right side of a menu in her life. Naomi approached the table, bottle angled at the precise 45 degrees she'd been trained to maintain. Lucas didn't look up from his phone. Evelyn was mid-story, gesturing with her left hand so that her engagement ring caught the light with each emphatic point. Something about a gala in the Hamptons. Something about someone's embarrassing toast. And then Evelyn laughed, sharp and bright, her hand sweeping dramatically toward her champagne flute. She actually said that in front of the ambassador. Naomi adjusted her angle instinctively, trying to account for Evelyn's gesture. The bottle tilted. One drop, just one single crimson drop, fell. It landed on the white silk cuff of Evelyn's sleeve. Time fractured. The conversation stopped mid-laugh. Evelyn's eyes dropped to her wrist. The tiny red stain spread slowly, like blood in water. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Evelyn stood. The chair scraped against marble with a sound like tearing fabric. Around them, conversations dimmed. Heads turned with the subtle curiosity of people who'd learned to observe disasters without appearing to stare. "Are you blind?" Evelyn's voice was sharp enough to cut crystal. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs, what that wine costs?" Naomi set the bottle down immediately, her hands already reaching for the napkin at her waist. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll get club soda I can." "You'll get fired is what you'll get." Evelyn's face had transformed from composed elegance to something colder, harder. "Do you understand that you've just ruined?" "I'm very sorry," Naomi said again, her voice quieter now, more controlled. "It was an accident, if you'll just let me." The slap came before the sentence finished. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp, wet, humiliating. "Thack." Naomi's head turned with the impact. A 5-fingered mark bloomed across her cheek like a brand. The napkin fell from her hands. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even move. Around them, Aurelius had gone completely still. Forks hovered in midair. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. The string quartet in the corner had dissolved into shocked silence. Even the waitstaff, trained to ignore drama, had frozen mid-step. Lucas finally looked up from his phone. Evelyn stood there, chest heaving slightly, her hand still raised like she might do it again. "You need to learn your place," she said, voice trembling now with something that might have been anger or might have been satisfaction. "People like you need to understand there are consequences." Naomi slowly, impossibly slowly, turned her head back to center. Her cheek was blazing red, but her eyes, when they finally lifted, were perfectly calm, dark, analytical, and looking at Evelyn with an expression that wasn't fear or humiliation or even anger. It was recognition. Like a chess player seeing the board 5 moves ahead. "You shouldn't have done that," Naomi said quietly. Her voice was different now, flatter, more controlled. The serval softness had evaporated. Evelyn blinked, thrown. "Excuse me." Lucas was staring now, really staring, at Naomi's face, at the way she held herself. Something was clicking behind his eyes, something like disbelief, something like recognition, something like fear. "Naomi," he whispered. The name fell into the silence like a stone into still water. Evelyn's head snapped toward him. "What?" But Lucas wasn't looking at his fiancée anymore. He was standing now, his phone forgotten on the table, his face pale. The entire restaurant had stopped breathing. And that's when everything changed. The whispers started like static. Not loud enough to be called conversation. Just the soft hiss of $200,000 worth of dental work trying not to be caught gossiping. Around table 7, silverware clinked back into motion with studied casualness, as if resuming dinner could erase what had just happened. But phones were already emerging from Herm's clutches and Brioni jacket pockets, angled low beneath table edges. Discreet. Deniable. Someone was already texting their publicist. Naomi stood perfectly still, her cheek still burning. The handprint had deepened from pink to angry red. each finger clearly visible like evidence at a crime scene. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her, but not one person was looking directly. That was the thing about wealth at this altitude. Cruelty could happen in full view and still be invisible. Witnesses required acknowledgement, and acknowledgement required caring. Nobody here cared about a waitress. Oh my God! Evelyn's hand flew to her chest, her voice pitching into something that sounded like distress but looked like performance. I didn't mean to, it's just that this dress is vintage Chanel and the wine was. She turned to the sommelier hovering nearby, voice trembling with manufactured emotion. You saw, didn't you? She wasn't even looking, she practically threw the bottle. The sommelier, a thin man in his 50s who'd probably apologized to rich people every day for the last 3 decades, nodded immediately. Of course, Ms. Harrington. Completely understandable. I'll have the manager come immediately. Naomi said nothing. She'd learned years ago that explaining only made it worse. Rich people didn't want explanations. They wanted submission. The manager arrived in under 30 seconds, a personal record probably. Marcel Beaumont, late 50s, French accent that got thicker when he was stressed. He took one look at the scene, and his face did that particular calculation Naomi had watched 100 times. Expensive customer, disposable employee, obvious math. Ms. Harrington, he didn't even glance at Naomi. I cannot express how deeply sorry I am. This is absolutely unacceptable. Please allow me to. She ruined my dress, Marcel. Evelyn's eyes were glittering now, enjoying this. The shock had worn off and been replaced by something sharper. This is a 1962 Chanel. Do you have any idea what that means? And the wine, my God, and 96 Margaux on white silk. I will personally cover the cleaning, Marcel said immediately, his hands clasped like prayer. And of course, your entire meal this evening is complimentary. The wine, everything. I am mortified this happened in our establishment. Naomi's jaw tightened. Our establishment, as if she wasn't standing right there. And her, Evelyn gestured at Naomi without looking at her, the way you'd point at a broken chair. What are you going to do about her? Marcel finally turned. His eyes met Naomi's for exactly half a second before sliding away. She will be dealt with, Ms. Harrington, I assure you. Dealt with like trash, like a problem. I want her fired. Evelyn's voice had gone cold now, the performance dropped. This was the real thing underneath. Tonight, now, I want to watch you fire her. Around them, the restaurant had achieved that particular frequency of silence that meant everyone was listening while pretending not to. Naomi could feel the attention like heat. Could feel the phones recording this from 3 different angles. Could feel the staff at the bar frozen mid-pour, terrified they might be next. But beneath the humiliation, beneath the burning on her cheek, something else was happening. She was counting. 12 tables, 47 guests, security stationed at north and south exits, 4 cameras, 1 by the kitchen, 1 at the bar, 2 covering the main floor. Evelyn's phone face up on the table, still unlocked. Lucas's briefcase visible beside his chair, zipper partially open. Her mind cataloged everything, with the cold precision of someone who'd been doing this much longer than serving wine. Please, Ms. Harrington, Marcel was saying, his voice oily with desperation. Let me handle this privately. We don't want to cause a scene. A scene? Evelyn laughed, sharp and bright. She caused the scene when she assaulted my clothing with a $1,000 bottle of wine. I'm simply asking for basic consequences. Or does Aurelius not hold its staff accountable anymore? The word accountable landed like a slap of its own. Naomi's hands were still at her sides, fingers loose, breathing steady. Inside, she was running calculations. Evelyn had made her first mistake by hitting her. Now she was making her second by escalating. Every word, every gesture, every witnessed moment was ammunition. Wait, she told herself, not yet, let her finish. Lucas was still staring at his phone, but his thumb had stopped scrolling. His shoulders had gone rigid. He was listening now, even if he was pretending not to. That was interesting. The billionaire who'd built an empire on other people's brilliance, suddenly uncomfortable watching someone get destroyed in public. Too little, too late. You know what? Evelyn stood again, her chair scraping. She walked toward Naomi with the deliberate slowness of someone who knew she had an audience. Maybe I'm being too kind. Maybe I should press charges. Assault. Destruction of property. I'm sure the police would be very interested in how you operate here, Marcel. Naomi didn't move, didn't blink. But she was studying Evelyn's face now, really studying it. The bone structure was familiar. She'd seen it in Forbes profiles, charity gala photos, SEC filings buried in footnotes. Harrington. Old Connecticut money, newer desperation. She knew that desperation. Had traced it through shell companies and offshore accounts and quiet family trusts hemorrhaging value. The Harringtons are broke, Naomi thought, and Evelyn's ring is a down payment on their survival. I don't think that will be necessary, Marcel said quickly, shooting Naomi a look that clearly meant apologize. For God's sake, just apologize. Miss Reed, do you have something to say to Ms. Harrington? The restaurant held its breath. Naomi looked at Evelyn, really looked at her, let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. I'm sorry my presence upset you, she said quietly. Not I'm sorry I spilled wine. Not I'm sorry I ruined your dress. I'm sorry my presence upset you. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She'd heard the difference. Your presence didn't upset me. Your incompetence did. Of course, Naomi said, my mistake. But her eyes stayed level, stayed calm, and there was something in that calmness that made Evelyn's hand twitch like she might slap her again. Marcel stepped between them. Miss Reed, go to the back. Wait in my office. We'll discuss this after service. Translation. You're fired, but I need you gone before this gets worse. Naomi nodded once, turned, started walking toward the kitchen. Behind her, Evelyn's voice carried across the dining room. I hope you've learned something tonight. People like you need to understand your place. Naomi's hand pushed through the kitchen door. People like you. She'd heard that phrase before, 4 years ago, right before she'd erased herself from the world. Inside the kitchen, she stopped, leaned against the wall, let her breathing slow. The sous chef was staring at her along with 2 line cooks and the dishwasher. They'd all heard, probably seen. You okay? The sous chef asked quietly. Naomi touched her cheek. It was still hot, still marked. Yeah, she said, I'm perfect. She walked past them toward the back office, where her locker was, where her real phone was, the one with encryption and offshore servers and access to things billionaires thought were private. Behind her, through the kitchen door, she could hear the restaurant slowly returning to normal. Conversations resuming, crystal clinking, the string quartet starting again. Like nothing had happened. Like she didn't matter. And maybe that was perfect too, because people didn't guard themselves against threats they couldn't see, didn't protect themselves against dangers they'd made invisible. Evelyn Harrington had just made the mistake of believing that invisibility meant powerless. Naomi pulled her phone from her locker, opened an encrypted folder, started typing. Out in the dining room, Lucas Whitmore finally looked up from his phone. His eyes scanned the restaurant, searching, looking for something, for someone. Looking for the waitress who'd just been humiliated at his table. But she was already gone. And in his chest, something cold was starting to spread, a feeling he hadn't had in years, something like recognition, something like dread. Because there was something about that waitress's face, something about the way she'd held herself, the way she'd looked at Evelyn with that flat, analytical calm. He pulled up his phone, opened his photo archive, started scrolling back, 4 years, 5. His hand stopped. There. His breath caught. Oh God, he whispered. At the table, Evelyn was laughing with the couple beside them, the incident already forgotten, already turning into an anecdote. But Lucas wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at a photograph from 2021, a company retreat, his entire executive team. And there, third from the left, looking directly at the camera with those same dark, analytical eyes. Naomi Reed. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. Lucas's phone lay face up on the white tablecloth, the photograph still glowing on the screen. 5 years ago, a company retreat in the Berkshires. His entire executive team lined up on the deck of the lodge, mountains behind them, champagne glasses raised. And there she was, third from the left. Younger, hair longer, wearing a blazer instead of a black apron. But those eyes, dark, analytical, impossibly calm, were exactly the same. His hands started shaking. Lucas, Evelyn's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Darling, are you all right? You look pale." He didn't answer, couldn't answer. His mind was racing backward through 4 years of carefully constructed distance, through the official story he'd told investors and board members and journalists. She left for personal reasons. We wish her well. No, we're not in contact. All of it true. All of it a lie. Because Naomi Reed didn't just leave Whitmore Capital. She vanished, completely. No forwarding address. No LinkedIn update. No digital footprint whatsoever. He tried to find her, of course he'd tried. Hired investigators who came back with nothing. She'd erased herself so thoroughly it was like she'd never existed. Except she had existed. She'd built the core trading algorithm that had made him a billionaire. She'd seen patterns in market data that no one else could see. She'd been quiet, brilliant, and essential. And he'd let her disappear without ever asking why. "Lucas," Evelyn's hand touched his arm, her voice sharpening. "You're scaring me. What's wrong?" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. Around them, conversations faltered. Heads turned. The same people who just watched Evelyn slap a waitress were now watching Manhattan's most successful hedge fund manager fall apart in public. "Where did she go?" His voice came out hoarse. "The waitress, where is she?" Marcel materialized from somewhere near the bar, still radiating anxiety. "Mr. Whitmore, I assure you the situation has been handled. The employee in question has been removed from." "I didn't ask if she was removed." Lucas's eyes locked on the manager with an intensity that made Marcel step back. "I asked where she went." "She's in my office, sir, waiting to be dismissed. But really, there's no need for you to." Lucas was already moving. "Lucas," Evelyn stood, her composure cracking. "What are you doing? It's just a waitress." He ignored her, pushed through the dining room with everyone watching, past tables where senators and CEOs sat frozen mid-conversation, past the sommelier station where staff pressed themselves against the wall to let him pass, through the kitchen door that swung shut behind him with a soft whoosh of displaced air. The kitchen had gone quiet. Line cooks stood motionless at their stations. The sous chef was staring at him with wide eyes. No one spoke. The air smelled like butter and wine and burnt sugar. "Where's Marcel's office?" Lucas demanded. The sous chef pointed wordlessly toward a narrow hallway at the back. Lucas walked. His heart was hammering. His mind kept looping the same thought. "She's been here all this time, right here, serving wine to the people who took credit for her work." The office door was half open. He stopped in the doorway. She was sitting in Marcel's chair, her back to him, her phone in her hands. The black apron was untied, hanging loose around her waist. She was typing something, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the screen. She didn't turn around. "You can tell Marcel I already cleaned out my locker," she said quietly. "I'm just finishing something." "Naomi." His voice broke on her name. She went completely still. For 3 full seconds she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly she set her phone down on the desk. When she turned to face him, her expression was unreadable. Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. It was her. Definitely her. Older, leaner, hair cut shorter. The light had gone out of her eyes, that particular spark she used to get when explaining a complex algorithm or solving a problem no one else could see. But it was unmistakably Naomi Reed. "It is you," he whispered. She studied him for a long moment. "Hello, Lucas." Her voice was different, flatter, like she'd trained all the warmth out of it. "What?" He couldn't form the question. There were too many questions. "What are you doing here?" "Working," she said simply. "Or I was, until about 10 minutes ago." "No, I mean," he stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "Naomi, you disappeared 4 years ago. You were gone. I looked for you. We all looked for you." "Did you?" It wasn't a question. Her eyes stayed level, watching him with that same analytical calm she'd always had. The same calm she'd shown when Evelyn slapped her. Something about that calmness made his stomach drop. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Why didn't you tell me? Why would you?" He gestured helplessly. "You're serving wine, Naomi. You built a system that processes billions of dollars in trades. You have a PhD from MIT. You had," she corrected quietly, past tense. "What?" "I had a PhD. I had a career." Her hand touched her cheek where the handprint was still visible. "Now I have this." The shame hit him like a physical blow. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry about Evelyn. I didn't know. I wasn't paying attention." "You're never paying attention, Lucas." Her voice stayed calm, but something sharp had entered it. "That's always been your problem." The accusation landed cleanly. He'd heard it before, from ex-girlfriends and estranged family members, and his therapist that one time Evelyn had convinced him to go. "You're brilliant with numbers and blind to people." "Tell me why you left," he said. "Please, just tell me what happened." Naomi stood. She was smaller than he remembered, or maybe he'd just gotten used to seeing her behind a desk instead of in service clothes. But when she looked at him, he felt like he was the one being examined, being measured, being found wanting. "I found something," she said finally. "In the code, a backdoor. Someone was siphoning data from our trading systems, live market positions, client portfolios, everything." Lucas's blood went cold. "What? When? Why didn't you?" "I did tell you," she said quietly. "You told me I was being paranoid, that our security was airtight, that I was exhausted and needed a vacation." He didn't remember that, couldn't remember that. But 4 years ago he'd been drowning in acquisition negotiations and investor calls and... "Oh God," he whispered, "I didn't listen." "No," Naomi agreed, "you didn't." "But why disappear? Why not go to the SEC or the board or..." "Because I traced it." Her voice stayed perfectly level, but her hands had formed fists at her sides. "I traced the backdoor to its source, and when I did, I got a visit from some very serious people who explained that I had 2 choices: disappear quietly, or people I loved would start having accidents." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Who?" Lucas demanded. "Who threatened you?" Naomi's eyes flicked toward the closed office door, toward the dining room beyond, toward the table where Evelyn was probably still sitting, probably still laughing. "Naomi," Lucas said carefully, "who was it?" Before she could answer, the office door burst open. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her face flushed, her perfect composure finally cracked. Behind her, Marcel hovered anxiously, making small apologetic gestures that no one was watching. "What the hell is going on?" Evelyn's voice was shrill now, the cultured accent slipping. "Lucas, everyone's starring. You're making a scene over a waitress." "She's not a waitress." Lucas's voice came out harder than he'd intended. "This is Naomi Reed." Evelyn blinked. "Who?" "Naomi Reed," he repeated louder now. "The woman who built the trading algorithm that made Whitmore Capital what it is. The woman whose work generated half our returns. The woman who," his voice cracked, "the woman I let disappear." Evelyn stared at Naomi, really looked at her for the first time. Something flickered across her face, confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like panic. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Lucas, you're not making sense. This is clearly just some." "It's her," Lucas said. "I've known her for 7 years, it's her." Marcel had gone pale. Behind Evelyn, other faces had appeared in the hallway, curious diners who'd followed the drama, staff members who'd heard the commotion. The scene was spilling out of the office and into public view. Naomi watched them all with that same terrible calm. "You should go back to your table, Lucas," she said quietly. "This doesn't concern you anymore." "Doesn't concern me," he stared at her. "Naomi, you built my company, you are my company, how can you say?" "That's not my name anymore." The words cut through the noise like glass. Everyone went silent. Naomi's eyes stayed on Evelyn now, dark and unblinking. "That person died 4 years ago," she continued, her voice soft but carrying. "The person you knew, the person who trusted you, she's gone." Evelyn's face had drained of color. Her hand clutched the doorframe like she needed the support. I don't understand," she stammered. "Lucas, what is she talking about?" But Lucas wasn't listening to Evelyn anymore. He was watching Naomi's expression, watching the way she looked at his fiancée, and understanding, with slow, creeping horror, exactly what Naomi had been about to tell him before Evelyn interrupted. "Oh my God," he whispered, "it was you." Evelyn's laugh came out broken, desperate. "Me? That's insane. I've never even met this woman before tonight." "Liar." The word came from Naomi, quiet and absolute. The hallway erupted into whispers. The hallway outside Marcel's office had become a theater. Staff pressed against walls. Diners crowded the kitchen doorway. Phones were raised openly now, not even pretending discretion. Whatever happened next would be recorded from a dozen angles, distributed through 100 private group chats, and arrive in the inbox of every major financial journalist by morning. Naomi stood perfectly still in the center of it all, her eyes locked on Evelyn. "You want to know why I disappeared?" Her voice was quiet, but in the suspended silence it carried like a bell. "I'll tell you." Lucas stepped closer. "Naomi, you don't have to." "Yes," she said, still watching Evelyn. "I do." She took a slow breath, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Not louder, but deeper, like she was pulling the words from somewhere she'd kept them locked for years. 4 years ago, I was the lead quantitative analyst at Whitmore Capital," she began. "Most people didn't know my name. I wasn't on the executive team. I didn't go to galas or give interviews. But I built the system that made Lucas a billionaire." Someone in the crowd gasped softly. Phones shifted angles, zooming in. "It was called Artemis," Naomi continued. "A predictive trading algorithm that could analyze patterns across 17 different data streams simultaneously: market sentiment, political events, weather patterns, social media trends. It saw connections that human traders missed. It made money while other firms were still trying to understand what happened." Lucas's hands had gone to his face. He was nodding slowly, like a man watching his past reconstruct itself in front of him. "I worked 80-hour weeks," Naomi said. "I slept in the office. I skipped my sister's wedding because we were close to a breakthrough. I gave everything to that code. And it worked. God, it worked. Within 18 months, Whitmore Capital went from managing $2 billion to managing 15. She paused. Her hand touched the red mark on her cheek, almost absently. "Then I found the leak." The hallway seemed to lean in. "It was subtle," she continued. "Millisecond delays in execution, tiny discrepancies in the logs, the kind of thing you'd miss unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. But I knew my code the way a mother knows her child. I knew when something was wrong." Her eyes never left Evelyn, who had gone very still. There was a backdoor, hidden in a subsystem I'd inherited from the previous infrastructure. Someone had modified it beautifully, elegantly, almost perfectly. They were copying our trading positions in real time. Every position Artemis took, every strategy we deployed was being mirrored somewhere else. Someone was front-running us, making money off my work. Jesus, Lucas breathed, how much? Millions, Naomi said simply. Maybe hundreds of millions over 2 years. It was hard to quantify because they were careful. They never took enough to trigger alerts, just slow, steady theft. Marcel had pressed himself against the wall, his face ashen. This wasn't just restaurant drama anymore. This was the kind of story that ended careers and launched federal investigations. I spent 3 weeks tracing it, Naomi continued, her voice taking on a mechanical quality like she was reciting code. Through proxy servers and shell corporations, through offshore trusts in the Caymans and holding companies in Luxembourg, every layer designed to obscure the source. But I followed it anyway because that's what I do. I see patterns. I find connections. She finally looked away from Evelyn, turning to the crowd gathered in the hallway. It led to the Harrington Family Trust. The whispers erupted immediately. People knew that name. Old Connecticut money, museum wings, political donations, the kind of wealth that came with genealogy charts and summer compounds. Evelyn's face had gone from pale to gray. That's a lie, she said, but her voice was shaking. You're making this up. Why would we need to? Because you were broke. Naomi's voice was gentle now, almost kind. Not publicly. The trust still looked fine on paper, but I saw the debt, the over-leveraged real estate, the bad investments your father made trying to recover from 2008. The Harrington name was a facade held up by desperation and credit. Lucas turned to Evelyn. Is that true? Evelyn's mouth opened, closed. Her hand clutched her diamond ring like a lifeline. Naomi continued, relentless. I didn't go to the SEC immediately. I should have, but I didn't. I went to the source first. I wanted to understand why. I thought maybe it was a mistake or maybe someone had been coerced. I thought. Her voice caught for just a moment. I thought there was an explanation that didn't mean what I feared it meant. What happened? Someone in the crowd asked. I got a visit, Naomi said quietly. 2 men. They came to my apartment at 3 in the morning. They knew where my sister lived. They knew where my parents lived. They knew my nephew's school schedule. They showed me photos, surveillance, weeks of it. The hallway had gone completely silent, except for the soft hum of kitchen equipment. They told me I had 48 hours to disappear, completely. No trace, no contact with anyone from my old life. If I went to the authorities, if I told anyone what I'd found, people I loved would start having accidents. Tragic, random, untraceable accidents. Lucas's voice came out strangled. Why didn't you tell me? Naomi finally looked at him, and there was something almost pitying in her expression. I tried, Lucas. I came to your office. I told you I'd found irregularities in the system. You said I was paranoid. You said I needed rest. You said, she paused, you said I was being emotional and that the numbers didn't lie. He flinched like she'd hit him. So I made a choice, Naomi continued. I erased myself. I deleted my social media. I closed my bank accounts. I moved every 30 days. I changed my name legally twice. I learned how to become invisible. But why here? Lucas gestured at the restaurant around them. Why service work you could have? Hidden in tech, Naomi's laugh was bitter. Lucas, you don't understand how small that world is. Facial recognition at conferences, LinkedIn crawlers, professional networks that track everyone. I needed to disappear into a world where nobody looks at faces, where people are furniture. The weight of that settled over the hallway. I worked as a barista in Portland, she said, a housekeeper in Phoenix, a retail clerk in Dallas, always moving, always watching. And then 6 months ago, I saw an article about Whitmore Capital's upcoming merger, about Lucas Whitmore's engagement to Evelyn Harrington. Evelyn made a small sound, almost like a whimper. And I realized, Naomi continued, her voice hardening, that it wasn't over, that the theft had just changed forms, that this, she gestured at Evelyn's ring, was phase 2. That's insane, Evelyn said desperately, looking around for support. Lucas, she's clearly disturbed. She's making up stories about. Once you're married, Naomi said, speaking over her, you'll have legal access to everything. His private servers, his biometric security, his offshore backup systems. The wedding isn't romantic, Evelyn. It's a deadline. Lucas staggered backward like he'd been shoved. No, he said. No, we've been together for 2 years, we. Have you? Naomi tilted her head. Or did she pursue you exactly 18 months after I disappeared? Did she show up at charity events you attended? Did she engineer introductions through mutual friends? Did she seem perfectly suited to you, your interests, your tastes, your world? Evelyn's composure finally shattered. Stop it, just stop talking. The engagement happened 3 months ago, Naomi continued. The wedding is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. That's when the merger closes. That's when your access would become complete. That's when. Shut up, Evelyn's scream cut through the hallway. You don't know anything. You're just a jealous, pathetic woman who can't accept that you're nobody. The slap had been sharp. This was sharper. Naomi absorbed it without flinching. I came back, she said quietly, because I knew you'd get arrogant. I knew that if I made myself visible in your world, invisible but present, eventually you'd stop seeing me, and I was right. She turned to Lucas. I've been working at Aurelius for 3 months, she said. I've served you dinner 6 times. 6 times, Lucas. You never looked at me once. The devastation on his face was total. But tonight, Naomi continued, turning back to Evelyn, you made a mistake. You hit me, in public, in front of witnesses, and now everyone's looking. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket, tapped the screen. I've been documenting everything, every transaction, every shell company, every connection between the Harrington Trust and the offshore accounts siphoning from Whitmore Capital. 4 years of evidence. Evelyn's knees buckled. She caught herself against the doorframe. The slap wasn't an accident, Naomi said. I engineered it. I waited until you were comfortable, until you felt safe enough to show your real self. And you did exactly what I knew you would. The hallway erupted. Questions shouted from every direction. Phones thrust forward. Marcel backing away, probably calculating how to distance the restaurant from this. But Naomi ignored them all. She walked forward past Evelyn, past Lucas, past the crowd. At the threshold of the kitchen, she stopped and turned back. This was never an accident, she said clearly, looking at Evelyn. I came back for this, for you, for all of it. Then she pushed through the kitchen door and disappeared into the dining room beyond. Behind her, chaos erupted. But Naomi Reed, no longer invisible, no longer powerless, walked through it untouched. The hunt was over. The reckoning had just begun. The word liar still hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Naomi stood perfectly still in the hallway outside Marcel's office, her eyes locked on Evelyn with the calm precision of a surgeon about to make an incision. Around them, the crowd had swelled. Staff, diners, people who'd followed the commotion from the main dining room. Phones were raised openly now, no pretense of discretion. Whatever happened next would be documented, distributed, immortalized. Evelyn's face had gone from gray to white. I've never seen you before tonight. Lucas, tell her. Don't, Naomi's voice cut through the stammering, not loud but absolute. Don't insult everyone's intelligence by pretending. We're past that now. Lucas stood between them, looking like a man watching his life disassemble in real time. Naomi, what are you saying? That Evelyn knew about the back door. I'm saying, Naomi replied, her eyes never leaving Evelyn, that she didn't just know about it. She's the reason I disappeared, and she's the reason you proposed. The hallway erupted in whispers. Phones shifted angles, zooming in. That's insane, Evelyn said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Her hand went to her throat, where a delicate platinum necklace suddenly looked like it was choking her. Lucas and I met at the Morgan Library benefit. It was random. It was. It was 18 months after I vanished, Naomi said calmly. 18 months to the day, actually. You were seated at his table, not by accident. Your family purchased that seat specifically, paid $50,000 to the event organizers to ensure the placement. Lucas's head snapped toward Evelyn. Is that true? Lots of people buy seats at galas, Evelyn said desperately. That doesn't mean. You shared a love of modern art, Naomi continued, her voice taking on that measured, analytical quality. Specifically, abstract expressionism, Rothko, Pollock, the exact artists Lucas collects. You told him you'd written your thesis on them at Yale. I did write. You wrote about French Impressionism, Naomi said. I read it. Your thesis is publicly available through Yale's library system. You didn't mention Rothko once. Evelyn's mouth opened, closed, no words came out. The crowd was dead silent now, watching this dissection happen in real time. You also told Lucas you grew up sailing in Newport, Naomi continued. That you loved the ocean, that you'd always dreamed of buying a boat together someday. Lucas was staring at Evelyn now, his face unreadable. Lucas bought his first yacht 3 months after you met, Naomi said. The Evelyn Rose, named after you, docked in Newport. You told him it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done. It was romantic, Evelyn whispered. You get seasick, Naomi said flatly. Severely. You've been on that boat exactly twice in 2 years. Both times you stayed below deck the entire trip. Lucas thought you were just tired. Someone in the crowd gasped softly. Lucas's voice came out strangled. How do you know that? Because I've been watching, Naomi said simply. For months. And because everything about your relationship follows a pattern. She became exactly who you needed her to be. She mirrored your interests, your values, your world. She was perfect, Lucas, suspiciously perfect. People can have things in common, Evelyn said, but she was trembling now. That doesn't mean. When did you propose? Naomi asked Lucas directly. He blinked, thrown by the question. 3 months ago, October 15th. And when does the Silverman merger close? Lucas went very still. December 20th. 6 weeks from now, Naomi said. And when's the wedding? December 15th, Lucas whispered. 5 days before the merger. The pieces were clicking together in his mind now. Naomi could see it happening, the way his eyes widened, the way his breathing changed, the way he took a small step away from Evelyn. The merger gives you control of Silverman's infrastructure, Naomi said, still watching Evelyn. Their server architecture, their security protocols, their client database. It's the biggest acquisition Whitmore Capital has ever attempted, worth $4 billion. She turned to Lucas. And once you're married, Evelyn becomes your legal spouse. She gets access to everything. Your biometric security, your private servers, your offshore backup systems, all the places where the real control lives. No, Lucas said, but it sounded more like a plea than a denial. We're getting married because we love. The wedding is a deadline, Naomi said quietly. Not a celebration. It's a corporate takeover disguised as a romance. Evelyn's face crumpled. That's not we do love each other, I do love. When's your father's debt payment due? Naomi asked. The question landed like a hammer. Evelyn froze. December 30th, Naomi answered for her. $470 million owed to a consortium of creditors. The Harrington Family Trust has been underwater for 6 years. Your estates are mortgaged. Your art collection is collateral. Your name is the only thing you have left, and even that's been pledged. The crowd was leaning in now, hungry for every word. If your father doesn't pay, Naomi continued, the Harrington name gets liquidated. The Connecticut house, the Martha's Vineyard compound, the legacy, everything. 200 years of American aristocracy erased. Lucas looked like he might be sick. Evelyn, tell me this isn't true. Evelyn's eyes were swimming with tears now. Real ones, Naomi noted. Maybe the first genuine emotion she'd shown all night. My father was desperate, she whispered. They were going to take everything. The banks, the creditors, they were circling like vultures. He tried everything. Every investment failed. Every loan got called. We were drowning. So he sent you after me, Lucas said, his voice hollow. He asked me to meet you, Evelyn corrected, desperation creeping into her voice. To get close. To see if maybe there was a way to salvage things. But I didn't know about the back door. I swear, I didn't know about the theft until... Until when? Naomi pressed. Evelyn's face twisted. Until 6 months ago, when my father told me about the arrangement, about what would happen after the wedding. He said it was already in motion, that people were counting on me, that if I didn't go through with it. She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Your family would lose everything, Naomi finished softly. And maybe worse, because the people who threatened me 4 years ago, the ones who showed me photos of my nephew, they're the same people your father borrowed from, aren't they? Evelyn's silence was answer enough. Lucas staggered backward, his shoulder hitting the wall. 2 years. We've been together for 2 years. Was any of it real? I thought, Evelyn's voice broke. I thought maybe I could make it real. That maybe if I played the part long enough, I'd actually feel it. That maybe you'd love me enough that I could tell you the truth and you'd forgive me and we could. Use me to pay your father's debts, Lucas finished, his voice like ice. Save my family, Evelyn corrected desperately. Lucas, you have to understand, I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted. You slapped her. Lucas's voice cut through the tears. You humiliated her in public. You threatened to have her fired. You did all of that to the woman who actually built my company while you were, what? Playing house. Pretending to love me so you could rob me. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen noise had stopped. Everyone was frozen, watching this unravel. Evelyn turned to the crowd, her face desperate. You don't understand. My father, he's not a bad man. He just made mistakes. And when you make mistakes at that level, there are consequences. There are people who come to collect, and they don't care about legacy or family or... So you became one of them, Naomi said quietly. You stopped being a victim and became a weapon. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She swayed slightly, her hand gripping the doorframe. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. Yes, you did, Naomi replied. You could have told Lucas the truth. You could have gone to the authorities. You could have done what I did, disappeared rather than hurt innocent people. But you came back, Evelyn said, and there was something almost accusatory in her voice now. You came back and you engineered this. You made me slap you. You wanted this to happen. Yes, Naomi said simply, because you needed to be stopped. Lucas was staring at the engagement ring on Evelyn's hand now, the 4-carat diamond that had cost him $150,000, the symbol of a love that had never existed. Take it off, he said quietly. Evelyn's hand went to the ring protectively. Lucas, please, if you'll just listen. Take it off. His voice was shaking but absolute. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she slowly twisted the ring off. It came away with difficulty. She'd worn it for 3 months, and it had left a small indent in her skin. The white mark looked like a scar. She held it out to him, tears streaming down her face. Lucas didn't take it, just stared at it like it was evidence of a crime. Around them, the restaurant had achieved that particular quality of silence that meant everyone had reached the same conclusion simultaneously. Evelyn Harrington wasn't just a cruel socialite who'd slapped a waitress. She was a conspirator, a fraud, a weapon aimed at a man who trusted her. the sympathy that might have existed for her, the understanding that she was trapped between impossible choices, evaporated in the face of her confession. She hadn't just known about the theft, she'd been part of it, actively, deliberately complicit. Naomi watched Evelyn's reputation collapse in real time, watched phones capture every tear, every trembling hand, every desperate word. By morning, this would be everywhere. By next week, the Harrington name wouldn't just be in debt, it would be poison. "You weren't cruel because you enjoyed it," Naomi said quietly, almost gently. "You were cruel because you had to be. Because if you let yourself see me as human, you'd have to see what you were doing as wrong. So you made me invisible, made me nobody, made it easier to hurt me." Evelyn's face was a mask of anguish. "That's what makes you dangerous," Naomi continued. "Not that you're evil, but that you convinced yourself you had no choice, that you were the victim, even while you were destroying people's lives." The engagement ring fell from Evelyn's fingers. It hit the marble floor with a sharp, clear sound that echoed through the hallway like a bell tolling. No one moved to pick it up. The restaurant had transformed into a battlefield, without a single shot fired. Security arrived within 90 seconds, 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, and the kind of calm, practiced movements that suggested military backgrounds. They'd been called for situations like this before. Celebrity meltdowns, insider trading accusations whispered over dessert, the occasional domestic dispute between people too wealthy to be arrested quietly. But they'd never seen anything quite like this. The head of security, Marcus, according to his name badge, took one look at the scene and made the obvious calculation. Evelyn Harrington, trembling against the doorframe, makeup smeared, looking like she might collapse. Naomi Reed, standing perfectly composed in her waitress uniform, phone still in her hand. Lucas Whitmore, billionaire investor, looking like someone had just explained that his entire life was a carefully constructed lie. "Ms. Harrington," Marcus said gently, approaching with his hands visible, non-threatening. "I need you to come with me. We're going to sort this out somewhere private." "No," Evelyn's voice came out broken. "You don't understand, she's lying, she's—" "We'll figure that out, ma'am, but right now I need you to—" "Arrest her," Evelyn pointed at Naomi, her hands shaking. "She assaulted me with wine, she destroyed my property, she's making terrorist threats." The crowd shifted, phones angled for better shots. This was the moment everyone expected. The wronged woman demanding justice, the abuser led away in handcuffs, the satisfying arc of consequences. "Actually," Naomi said quietly, "I don't want to press charges." The hallway went silent. Marcus turned to her, confusion crossing his professional mask. "Ma'am." "For the slap," Naomi clarified, touching her cheek where the handprint had faded to a dull red. "I'm declining to press assault charges." "What?" Evelyn's voice pitched high with disbelief. "You can't, after everything you just said." "I can," Naomi said calmly, "and I am." Lucas stepped forward. "Naomi, she hit you, in front of 50 witnesses, you have every right." "I know what my rights are, Lucas." Her eyes stayed on Evelyn. "I'm choosing not to exercise them, not for this." The crowd erupted in confusion. People turned to each other, trying to understand. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. The villain was supposed to be punished. Justice was supposed to be clear, dramatic, satisfying. Marcus looked between the two women, clearly out of his depth. "If you're not pressing charges, then—" "Call the police anyway," Naomi said, "but not for assault." A new voice cut through the murmurs. "Nobody's calling anyone yet." A man pushed through the crowd, late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit that somehow looked even more expensive than everyone else's. He carried a leather briefcase and the kind of authority that made people step aside automatically. "David Chen," he said, extending a card to Marcus. "Whitmore Capital's general counsel. I was having dinner downstairs when I received an urgent call." Lucas's face flooded with relief. "David, thank God. It's complicated, but... I heard. Chen's expression was unreadable. His eyes swept the scene, cataloging everything with the precision of someone who'd spent 30 years cleaning up messes for rich people. Then his gaze landed on Naomi. "Ms. Reed, it's been a long time." "Mr. Chen," Naomi nodded once. "Still fixing Lucas's problems, I see." Something almost like a smile crossed Chen's face. "Old habits." He turned to Marcus. "Give us the room. Everyone not directly involved in this situation needs to return to their tables or exit the restaurant. Now." His voice carried the weight of money and litigation. People began dispersing immediately, though phones stayed raised, still recording from the dining room. Once the hallway had cleared to just the core players, Naomi, Lucas, Evelyn, Chen, and Marcus, the lawyer set his briefcase on a nearby counter and opened it with practiced efficiency. "Ms. Reed," he said, pulling out a tablet, "you mentioned documentation. I assume you're willing to share." Naomi studied him for a long moment. "Depends. What's your play here, David?" "My play," Chen said carefully, "is protecting my client's interests, which, at the moment, seem to align with discovering the truth." "Your client," Evelyn started, her voice desperate. "Is Whitmore Capital," Chen cut her off smoothly. "Not you, Ms. Harrington. You're Lucas's fiancée, not his wife. You have no legal standing with the company." The distinction landed like a blade. Lucas was staring at Evelyn now, really looking at her. "Did you know?" His voice cracked. "About the back door, the theft, did you know?" Evelyn's face crumpled. "My father, he was desperate. They were going to lose everything. The house, the trust, the name, everything our family built for 200 years. He just needed." "So yes," Lucas's voice had gone flat, "you knew." "It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone." Evelyn's tears were flowing freely now. "It was just data, just information. And then when that woman disappeared, my father said it was over, it was safe, and then he suggested I should meet you, and I thought..." She looked at Lucas with something that might have been genuine anguish. "I thought maybe I could love you anyway, that maybe it could become real." But it never did. Naomi's voice was soft, almost gentle, because it was always a transaction. Evelyn didn't deny it. Chen was typing rapidly on his tablet. "Ms. Reed, I'm going to need everything you have. Transaction records, communications, architectural evidence of the back door, all of it." "Why should I trust you?" Naomi asked. "Because," Chen said, meeting her eyes, "I helped build Whitmore Capital too. Maybe not with code, but with contracts and compliance and corporate structure. And I won't watch it get destroyed by theft." He paused. "Also because I remember telling Lucas 4 years ago that something felt wrong about your sudden departure, that we should investigate, and he overruled me." Lucas flinched. Naomi pulled a small USB drive from her apron pocket. "Everything's here, encrypted. The password is," she glanced at Lucas, "Artemis 2019. The name of her algorithm, the year she'd completed it." Chen took the drive carefully, like it was evidence in a murder trial, which, in corporate terms, it essentially was. "Now," he said, turning to Evelyn, "you have 2 choices. Choice 1, we call the NYPD and the SEC right now. You get arrested for corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. It's public, it's messy, and your family name gets destroyed in headlines tomorrow." Evelyn was shaking her head. "Please." "Choice 2, Chen continued, his voice cold, "you cooperate fully. You tell us everyone involved. Every transaction, every communication, every person in your father's organization who knew about this. You wear a wire if we need you to. You become," he glanced at Naomi, "bait." "Bait," Evelyn whispered. "The people who threatened Ms. Reed," Chen explained. "The ones who made her disappear. They're still out there, still connected to your family. And I'm guessing they're nervous right now watching this scene unfold. They'll reach out, try to control the damage, and when they do, we need you to record everything." Evelyn looked like she might be sick. "They'll kill me." "They'll try," Chen said bluntly. which is why you'll have protection, federal protection if we do this right, but you need to give us everything first. And if I choose option 2, Evelyn's voice was barely audible, what happens to me after? That depends on how much you help, Chen said. Full cooperation might mean immunity, might mean witness protection, might mean you get to rebuild your life somewhere else under a different name. He paused. Or it might mean prison just with a reduced sentence, but at least you'd have a chance. Evelyn turned to Lucas, desperate. Lucas, please, tell them we were going to be married. Doesn't that mean anything? Lucas looked at her like she was a stranger. Did it mean anything to you? She opened her mouth, closed it. The answer was written on her face. I'll cooperate, she whispered finally. Marcus had been standing quietly by the door, but now he stepped forward. Mr. Chen, I still need to know, am I calling the police or not? Chen looked at Naomi. Your call, Ms. Reed. Everyone turned to her. The woman in the black apron who'd been slapped and humiliated and threatened into disappearing for 4 years. The woman who had every right to demand the most public, most satisfying revenge imaginable. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. No police, she said finally. Not yet, not until we have everyone. Evelyn's relief was visible, immediate. But Naomi continued, her voice hardening. She doesn't leave this building without an escort. She doesn't make phone calls without supervision. She doesn't contact anyone from her old life. As of right now, Evelyn Harrington is exactly what I was for 4 years. What's that? Evelyn asked, though she clearly already knew. A ghost, Naomi said softly. Alive but invisible, present but powerless, useful but utterly alone. The words settled over the hallway like frost. Chen nodded slowly. Marcus, I need you to escort Ms. Harrington to a car. Private exit. No photos. Mr. Whitmore's security team will take over from there. Wait, Evelyn's voice cracked. My things, my purse, my phone. Will be collected and delivered, Chen said. You're not going back to that table. The reality crashed over Evelyn all at once. No grand exit. No final speech. No chance to control the narrative. She'd walked into Aurelius as Manhattan royalty, and she was leaving as a criminal informant through the service entrance. She looked at Naomi one last time. You planned all of this. Yes, Naomi said simply. The wine, the slap, getting me to show everyone who I really am. Evelyn's laugh came out broken. You played me perfectly. I learned from the best, Naomi said. Your father taught me that the most dangerous opponent is the one you stop seeing. I just became invisible long enough for you to forget I was a threat. Evelyn's face crumpled completely. Marcus took her arm gently, guiding her toward the service elevator. She went without resistance, moving like someone in shock. At the elevator, she turned back one last time. Jail would have been easier, she said quietly, wouldn't it? Naomi didn't answer. The elevator doors closed. In the hallway, the only sound was breathing and the distant clatter of kitchen equipment. Lucas looked at Naomi. What happens now? She untied her apron slowly, folded it with precise movements, and set it on the counter. Now, she said, we finish this. The restaurant had emptied like a theater after a fire. Aurelius, which 2 hours earlier had been Manhattan's most coveted dining destination, now felt like the aftermath of something violent. Empty tables still held half-finished meals, filet mignon going cold, wine glasses abandoned mid-pour, desserts untouched. The chandeliers still glowed with the same expensive light, but now they illuminated absence instead of opulence. Naomi stood at the edge of the dining room, looking out over the wreckage of the evening. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling below, millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them continuing on while the world up here had just shattered. Behind her, she could hear Marcel arguing with his sous chef about damage control. The staff whispered in tight clusters near the bar. Every single person in the building was calculating how this would affect them, their careers, their carefully constructed positions in the ecosystem of wealth. None of them were looking at her anymore. She walked slowly back toward table 7. The white tablecloth was still pristine except for one small red stain, the single drop of wine that had started everything. Lucas's phone lay face down where he dropped it. His briefcase sat beside the chair, forgotten. And there, catching the light like a small cold star, was Evelyn's engagement ring. She'd left it behind. Naomi picked it up carefully. The diamond was flawless, probably 4 carats, probably cost more than most people made in a year. It was heavy, substantial, designed to announce status before a word was ever spoken. The band was still warm from Evelyn's finger. A symbol of false power, of transactions masquerading as love, of everything money could buy and nothing it actually could. Naomi set it back down on the tablecloth. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she picked up her folded black apron and placed it over the ring. The fabric settled like a shroud. Invisibility eclipsing illusion, service covering status, the thing that had made her powerless becoming the thing that had given her power. That's a hell of a metaphor. Lucas's voice came from behind her. She'd heard him approach but hadn't turned around. Now she did. He looked destroyed. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. The easy confidence that usually radiated from him had evaporated, leaving behind something raw and human and lost. "I didn't know you were into symbolism," Naomi said. "I'm not." He gestured helplessly at the apron and ring, "but even I can't miss that one." They stood in silence for a moment. Around them, the restaurant continued its quiet dissolution, staff clearing tables, management making hushed phone calls, the night manager already calculating how to spin this for tomorrow's press. "I'm sorry," Lucas said finally. "I know I've said it already, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I let you disappear and didn't." His voice broke. "I'm sorry I forgot you existed." Naomi studied him. 4 years ago, this apology might have meant everything. 4 years ago, she might have forgiven him, might have believed that good intentions counted for something. "You didn't forget I existed, Lucas," she said quietly. "You just never saw me clearly in the first place." He flinched. "That's not true. You were essential to the company," she finished. "To the algorithm, to the bottom line. But did you ever see me? Did you know I had a sister, that my mother was sick, that I played piano, that I was terrified of thunder?" She shook her head. "I was useful to you. That's not the same as being seen." Lucas opened his mouth, closed it. He had no defense because she was right. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," Naomi continued. "I'm saying it because you need to understand what happened. Evelyn didn't seduce you away from some great love. She identified a blind spot. You don't see service workers. You don't see assistants. You don't see the people who build the things you take credit for. And that made you vulnerable." "I know that now," he said hoarsely. "Do you?" Naomi turned fully to face him. "Or do you just know it about this situation? About me? Will you remember it next week when your new assistant brings you coffee? Will you remember it next month when the IT guy fixes your computer? Will you actually change, Lucas? Or will you just feel bad for a while and then go back to being the person who doesn't notice?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Lucas was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, more honest. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to say yes. I want to promise I'll be better. But I've spent 43 years seeing the world a certain way, and I don't know if I can rewire that overnight." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. "Then start small," Naomi said. "Learn people's names, look them in the eye. Ask questions that aren't about what they can do for you. It's not complicated, Lucas, it's just uncomfortable." He nodded slowly. "Will you come back to Whitmore Capital? We could could make you a partner, full equity, your name on everything, the recognition you deserve. Naomi almost laughed. That's your solution, promote me. What else can I offer? Nothing, she said simply, because I don't want to come back. He looked genuinely shocked. Why not? You built that company. It's yours as much as mine, maybe more. It was mine, Naomi corrected, 4 years ago. But that woman died, Lucas. The woman who wanted recognition and validation and a seat at tables where decisions get made. She disappeared the night men showed me photos of my nephew's school. She touched her apron. The person I am now doesn't need your equity or your partnership. I don't need to be visible in your world anymore. Then what do you need? Accountability, she said, for everyone involved. Your lawyer has the evidence. The SEC will have it by morning. The FBI probably by afternoon. The people who threatened me, who stole from your company, who turned Evelyn into a weapon, they all need to face consequences. They will, Lucas promised. Chen's already coordinating with. I know, I read the emails. He blinked when. While I was waiting in Marcel's office. I've had access to your systems for 3 months, Lucas. How do you think I knew exactly when to position myself at your table tonight? The implication settled over him slowly. You've been watching. Observing, she corrected, documenting, making sure that when this moment came I had everything I needed. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Every transaction, every communication between Evelyn and her father, every suspicious trade. It's all time-stamped, encrypted, and backed up in 7 different locations. Jesus, Lucas breathed. You really did plan all of this. Someone had to. She pocketed the phone again. The slap was the only variable. I couldn't force that, but I knew if I made myself visible enough, present enough, eventually she'd get comfortable. People always do, and comfortable people make mistakes. Lucas stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Maybe he was. What happens now? He asked. For you, I mean. Naomi looked around the empty restaurant one last time. At the tables where she'd served wine to people who never saw her face. At the kitchen where she'd tied her apron every shift. At the windows overlooking a city that had swallowed her whole and spit her back out. Now, she said, I step back into my life. The real one, not Naomi Reed the prodigy, not Naomi whatever name I was using this year, just myself, whoever that turns out to be. And Whitmore Capital isn't my problem anymore. She moved toward the exit. You built it on my work, Lucas. Now you get to run it without me. Think of it as an opportunity to finally understand what you actually do. He followed her across the dining room. Can we stay in touch? She paused at the door, turning back. Why? Because, he struggled with the words, because you're right, about all of it. And I need someone who will tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Naomi considered this. Ask me again in 6 months, after the indictments, after the trials, after you've proven you're actually capable of change. Then maybe. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no. She pushed through the door into the lobby. Lucas started to follow, but Chen emerged from the elevator bank, tablet in hand, already deep in crisis management mode. Lucas, I need you, Chen said. Press strategy, we need to get ahead of. His voice faded as Naomi kept walking. Through the lobby with its marble floors and its doorman who'd watched her come and go 100 times without ever seeing her. Through the rotating doors into the cool Manhattan night. The city smelled like rain and exhaust and a million different dinners cooking in a million different kitchens. Traffic honked in the distance. A siren wailed somewhere to the south. Normal sounds, normal chaos. Naomi stood on the sidewalk, breathing it in. 3 weeks later, the indictments came down. Federal charges, conspiracy, wire fraud, corporate espionage. The Harrington family trust collapsed overnight. Evelyn's father was arrested at his Connecticut estate. 2 offshore shell companies were seized. The story dominated financial news for a week, then a month, then became part of the permanent record of American corporate crime. Evelyn herself vanished into witness protection. The last photo showed her boarding a federal transport plane, looking 20 years older than she had at Aurelius, her famous blonde hair cut short and dyed brown. The Harrington name, built over 2 centuries of American wealth, was erased in 90 days. Lucas Whitmore testified before Congress, rebuilt his executive team, implemented new security protocols. Chen later told reporters that the company had learned painful lessons about internal oversight. Whether Lucas had learned anything else remained to be seen. And Naomi. She stood outside a coffee shop in Brooklyn 6 weeks after that night, phone in hand, looking at an email offer, a tech startup in San Francisco. They wanted her to build their trading platform. They'd seen her work, the legendary Artemis algorithm that everyone in the industry still talked about in hushed tones. They were offering equity, control, recognition. Everything she'd wanted 4 years ago. She deleted the email. Then she walked into the coffee shop, ordered a cappuccino from a barista who knew her name, and sat by the window with her laptop. On the screen was a new project, not a trading algorithm, something different, a non-profit that taught coding to women from service industries, waitresses, housekeepers, retail workers, people who were invisible, people who were underestimated, people who could change the world if someone just taught them how to see the patterns. She typed steadily, her reflection visible in the laptop screen. Behind her, through the window, Brooklyn morning traffic flowed past. The city continued. Life continued. Naomi Reed, visible now, powerful now, finally free, smiled and kept working. Not for revenge. Not for recognition. But for herself. And that finally was enough. What did you think of this story? What would you have done if you were Naomi? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories with wild twists, insane corporate drama, and calculated revenge, then you are in the right place. Do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a good story. And most importantly, hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another true life drama. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next story.